Copyright disclaimer. Under Title 17 U.S.C. Section 107, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing nonprofit, educational, or personal use, tips the balance in favor of fair use. Scythe Tleppo by Nathan Rich, Chapter 15, Naughty Nate. Desperation is the raw material of drastic change. Only those who can leave behind everything they have ever believed in can hope to escape. Pippa. After the graduation ceremony, my extended family went back to their lives, and my mother and I went to her place near Clearwater, Florida. When we arrived, I was surprised to find out my mom didn't have a back house. She didn't even live in a house at all. She lived in a 2-bedroom condo. I tried to hide my confusion, but felt a creeping frustration. She outright lied to me about having a house, but why? She introduced me to her new cat, Pippa, who didn't seem to like me much. The feeling was mutual. She was no Cujo or Clovis. My room was barren and generic. There were some scented candles on a bookshelf, and my old bed had flowery sheets on it. There was a picture of Lafayette on the wall, and lacy curtains over on the window. It was clearly a generic bedroom, set up for the occasional visitor. "Where's all my stuff?" I asked, already knowing what was coming. Annoyed, she replied, I threw all that Antheta stuff away. There really wasn't much. She was annoyed I would even ask about those old down-tone artifacts of the former me. Somewhere in there, maybe she felt guilty for getting rid of everything I owned. I doubt it. Somewhere in there, right? She threw away everything I had except one single red trunk. It was the same trunk I waited to never receive at the ranch all those years ago. In it were linens and old newspapers. She had erased me from her life completely for those 3 years. And I was starting to get the idea maybe she wasn't thrilled about me coming back. "I need you to pay rent," she added. $200 per month is fair. You need to be pitching in here. You're going to need to do chores too. Further annoyance swelled up inside, but I made sure it was barely noticeable. Rent? For this little room? I'm still 17. She brought me back into her work, a small all-Scientologist company called Beauty Marks. In barren downtown Clearwater, the company sold tiny nothings to pharmacies, miniature hair berets, little stick balls for kids to throw, and other useless garbage. Companies like this annoyed me. These aren't Scientologists. Aren't they supposed to be doing something to save the world? Vicky Galezade, another Scientologist, ran the place. She waved me in as a new employee, at the request of my mother. Yabor, because I had learned some computer basics as a child trying to play old games at my mother's work, Vicky thought I should help develop a shipping application. I agreed to whatever salary they offered and joined the company. And so I began my first job, programming shipping applications in Microsoft Excel 97, Visual Basic, a programming language I didn't know. With the time I had, I taught myself Visual Basic, explored the programming space, and developed relatively effective apps, which replaced the employee's method of scribbling on napkins to calculate shipping charges. My mother introduced me to a girl who worked there, also a Scientologist. Her father also worked there. We started dating, and that's what I spent most nights doing, hanging out with her. I programmed during the day and went out at night. She secretly disliked Scientology like I did, and we both sought release from the pressure of cult life. We started taking drugs as soon as we found them. In the largest nearby city, Tampa, is an area of downtown called Ybor City. On the weekends, 7th Avenue had the feel of a smaller Mardi Gras. There were raves with techno music and club kids seeping out into the streets. Ecstasy, the drug of choice for ravers, was cheap and plentiful. We couldn't get into clubs or bars since we were still too young, but drug dealers were happy to sell us pills. We sat in her car all night rolling on ecstasy when we had nowhere to go. Sometimes we could find a private rave at a house or a way into a club without showing ID. Our habits grew as our tolerances did. At my peak, I took 8 double-stacked TNT pills in a single night around 16 times, the standard dose. We took other kinds too, Tweeties, Mitsubishis, Shamrocks, Toyotas, and more. We became experienced on how to roll properly. Menthol inhalers are essential to a proper roll. Warmth, abstraction from alcohol, comfort, and safety all contribute to the euphoria. We chattered our teeth from the ecstasy pills, which aren't just MDMA. They have any number of other drugs added. I was familiar enough with drugs to identify them from their effects. We jabbered on meth, scratched our noses from heroin, and hallucinated from mescaline. The mescaline experience was a different, more real form of hallucinating than the LSD I was so friendly with. Mescaline creates a physical reality right in front of you that's indistinguishable from the real reality. People seemed to like me at raves. There was something about a punk rocker with spikes, a red mohawk, and a Dead Kennedys t-shirt, wandering around in raves that made them excited to meet me. What I liked about these environments was, perhaps because of their plur mantra, peace, love, unity, and respect. There were practically no fights or drama compared to bars and house parties. Plur sounded silly to me, but it did make a good environment for rolling on ecstasy. That's for sure. These ravers didn't want to prove anything or be one with nature. They wanted to escape into euphoria. Life here on Earth wasn't enough. My life wasn't enough for me either. I abandoned old nicknames. The ranch would have to be behind me to move forward. Some gangster at a rave gave me my latest name, Naughty Nate. I didn't mind. It was ironic to be a punk rocker with a name like Naughty Nate. When we didn't have access to drugs, we did what we could, mostly drinking. It took the edge off, but didn't satisfy the need for escape, and didn't bring euphoria. We weren't addicted, but we were habitual users. I told as much to Johnny when we reconnected by phone. I don't know if anyone at work got wind of what we were up to, but there were days I showed up to work completely numb, dead to the world. Ecstasy gives you a massive come down. Prepare to be in a rut the entire next day. They must have at least known we were drinking. Trouble. My girlfriend and I went to a grocery store to get some nitrous oxide. The plan was to buy some aerosol cans of whipped cream and huff them. She waited in the car and I ran in. Perhaps I wasn't thinking clearly, or maybe I just didn't care. But I began huffing the whipped cream cans right there in the aisle. Soon after that, security grabbed me and took me to the back to wait for the police. I got off with a slap on the wrist, since I had no priors, other than shoplifting 7 years before. Community service and a very disappointed mother. I was disappointed too, though not in myself exactly. A month later, my mother and I went to a work party, someone's birthday. I filled a cup with beer and she said, no. After some annoyed back and forth, she didn't allow me to drink it. I was only 17, that much was true. The boundaries were clear and there wasn't going to be any drinking. At home, I did all the chores in the house, like a little slave that he was. Dishes, cleaned the bathroom, even took care of Pippa. My mother's idea was for me to contribute half of everything. Even though I was underage, I had to pay rent and do all the chores, which I viewed as massively unfair. Am I her slave now? Exactly. She's not a very good person, let's just be honest. Very narcissistic. What kind of life is this? I already suspected she didn't want me back home, and this didn't help. She tried to get me back on Scientology courses, and in the beginning I obliged, but it still wasn't for me. Why would it be? I could never understand this constant need for someone to be told what to do and how to do it. Exactly. I avoided auditing and courses the best I could, but the situation was a ticking time bomb. I was back in my old mindset of wanting out of my living situation, only this time I had greater resolve. I wouldn't be soft about getting out, though. The last time I was wishy-washy, she sent me away for 3 years to fend for myself. I didn't trust my mother anymore. I knew she would start searching for another way to get rid of me, and when I was 18, those ways would not be fun. By the time November rolled around, I was planning to make a move. Johnny invited me to come live with him up in Washington and said he had a job, an ecstasy connection, an apartment, and a girlfriend, and was pretty much all set up. The plan rested in the front of my mind as I continued my daily grind. The trunk. Things at home went back to the same Scientology-dominated dynamic they were before. Only my mother was even more disappointed by things not going her way. Her expectations were higher. And I wasn't going to change. All these years of neglect and abuse didn't make me want to change. They made me want to evolve. But I wasn't comfortable evolving around her. It was as though I had stunted my growth for her. My subconscious mind was still in preservation mode. I wasn't yet safe. I couldn't express emotions. Will I be this way forever? Enough was enough. I needed a break after only 2 months of being back. I couldn't feign interest in the Scientology life with a mother who had stopped loving me as soon as I resisted Scientology. It's conditional love. Narc 101. Did she ever actually love me? I couldn't go to work every day and be around it. I was in the headquarters of Scientology, for God's sake. What the hell was I doing? I let Johnny know I was coming and bought a Greyhound bus ticket. I packed some clothes in the very same red trunk my mother never sent to the ranch and slowly pushed it out of my window. I climbed out and carried that trunk down to a taxi for a ride to the Greyhound station. After 2 months, the show was over. I didn't know that I would never see my mother again. The long ride. At the Greyhound station, I didn't need to show anyone my ID. I simply got on and headed out. The scheduled time for the ride was 4.5 days, but because of delays, it took 5.5. The bus stopped at every city along the way. Birmingham, Alabama was the worst of them. The security guard at the station told us that if anyone left, he would not protect them from the people outside. Through the glass door, I could see only bicycles circling and figures standing around, probably drug dealers or gang members. I slept on the floor of the station, waiting for the next bus. Time did its best to drag on, but nothing felt long to me anymore. A few days or weeks was all the same to me. Unfortunately, I ran out of money, and I had to depend on the generosity of people seated around me who happened to notice. I hadn't eaten since they joined the voyage. When I finally arrived in Tacoma, Washington, I was glad to see my friend there to pick me up. He had a beaten-up sports car, but he looked the same as I remembered him: black leather jacket, boots, punk clothes. Good old Johnny. That night he informed me of our new situation. Everything was much worse than it was when I left. Somehow, in the span of time it took me to arrive, he had lost his apartment and his ecstasy connection. His girlfriend broke up with him, and his former drug dealer mistakenly thought Johnny ripped him off and was after him. The only thing Johnny still had was his car. I abandoned the red trunk and threw my clothes and other junk in his trunk. Well, I guess this is how we are going to live now. He told me not to worry. He had a few friends that could help us out. He knew some people from a mechanics class at a vocational school. Neither of us were locals. We didn't have much to go on. Vials. We went on to meet one of his friends from school, a drug addict and dealer named Michelle. She was already in bad shape when we met her, thin and fiendish, worn out from life with a massive crystal methamphetamine habit that she supported by selling high-grade weed to her friends. She gave us meth to sniff and weed to sell, which we got rid of at no profit. In exchange, she let us sleep in her apartment, which had 2 couches. We sold the weed to anyone we could, mostly people Johnny already knew from school. I didn't do much selling. At that point, Johnny was supporting me fully. I wasn't much of a fan of weed, but anything helped at this point. The meth was interesting, but not as fun as the ecstasy I became accustomed to. Johnny knew some other kids who sold LSD. We got a 110-hit vial of liquid acid for $90, which we borrowed from Michelle. We could sell the acid for $1 to $5 per hit, depending on the buyer, but we were no Cali cartel. Selling 50 hits could take weeks. It took so long, in fact, we decided to do half the vial ourselves and sell enough to cover another one. We were mixing meth and acid quite a lot, and of course weed. Sometimes we could afford to buy 2 vials with the previous one's earnings, which left an entire vial to ourselves. The problem with mixing meth and acid is they battle it out and meth always wins. Generally, any powder wins out over any other non-powder drug. Eventually, there wasn't much choice but to focus on the meth. One benefit of meth was that, while it was difficult and weird to eat while high on LSD, it was downright impossible while high on meth. This cut our food costs down. We lived on McDonald's, especially the 29-cent hamburgers and 39-cent cheeseburgers on Tuesdays and Sundays. For other days, we had Jack in the Box, Taco Bell, or nothing at all. We ate magic mushrooms as well. When we got access to them, meth, mushrooms, and acid together led me to one of my first truly dark, bad trips. We had been trying to watch the Pink Floyd and Alice in Wonderland combination that allegedly went together like magic on drugs. Johnny and I laid on the couches at his friend's house, completely unimpressed. I eventually watched the ceiling and let my thoughts take control of the trip, which was more interesting. For a while, my heart started pounding and felt like it was going to explode. My grandfather died of a heart attack. Am I next? The palpitations, a word and concept I didn't know at the time, increased. Panic bombarded my acid trip. The meth contributed to the heart rate and my paranoia. Afterward, I finally came down from the introspective nightmare. I decided not to mix meth and acid anymore. I started feeling real regret about coming out to Washington. I wanted to go home back to my family. I was weak. I called my mom long distance as soon as I could. Disconnection. Johnny drove me to a hill with a payphone and stayed in the car as I dialed my mother's number. She picked up. "Hello?" "Hi, Mom," I said softly. "What do you want?" she snapped, obviously regretting taking the call. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I ran away. I want to come home," I whimpered. "Are you on drugs? Where are you?" "I'm in Seattle, Mom. Can I come home?" "I want to do my Purif. I don't want to do drugs anymore." "No, don't come here. Let me give you the number to my friend Scott. He's up there at the Seattle org. He can help you do the Purif." "I don't want you to come to Florida. You stay in Seattle and go do your Purif, okay?" The coldness in her voice expressed a condescending indifference. No motherly instinct at all. No care. She didn't want me in her life at all. "Can I call Sharon? Maybe she can help me," I pleaded. "Nathan, no one in the family wants to communicate with you anymore, okay?" So cruel. "Did you talk to her?" I whimpered. "Yes." She was very annoyed. "I'm not going to give you her number. She doesn't want to talk to you anymore." My mother stonewalled me. She made it clear to me how the family felt. They didn't want me. They were disconnecting from me like they did with my father. The ranch failed them twice. I left the Sea Org. I wasn't a Scientologist. And that was that. I was out of their lives, and that's how they wanted it. "Okay, Mom. Okay, I'm going to go now. I'm sorry, Mom." She hung up without replying. Cold-hearted. I started to cry on the sidewalk, surrounded by the beautiful green hue of Washington. My brain raced, doused in drugs, emotion and pain. It wanted to revert my life to how it was before. Prometheus brought me Scythe Tleppo. I didn't want any of that insanity. I wanted to be a boy again and just start over somehow. Please. My internal begging changed nothing. I walked slowly back to the car, back to my new life. I didn't take the exchange lightly. Her words pierced my soul. She was done with me. Johnny understood the situation with my family, having been with me at the ranch for so long. It was at that point the only person in the entire world that cared if I lived or died. With my pathetic attempt behind me, I cranked up the LSD usage. This acid didn't just burn through my mind, it burned through my reality. No reality existed but what my mind could invent. In my mind, life could be much more than the painful reality around me. We took our LSD levels back to when we were in the barn of the ranch. We tripped on LSD day after day all the time, every day and night without break. We had an unlimited supply of liquid LSD and infinite appetites for escape. The energy inside me began breaching my orifices. It was coming out, with or without my acceptance. I tried to sift it together with LSD, but madness was near. We drove around one night with some friends looking for someone's house party we heard about. But we're having a hard time finding it. Acid is one hell of a drug. The car's dashboard was mechanical and digital, like a robotic boat deck. The windshield was our visor to the video game of road and sidewalks. We cruised around, unable to stably identify reality. We were in a driving simulator. The car slowed to a crawl, and no amount of fiddling around with dials and knobs helped. It came to a complete stop in the middle of the road. "I think we're out of gas," Johnny proclaimed. I thought he meant as humans we were out of purpose, but it turned out that he was saying the car was out of gas. That makes more sense. We got out like clowns rolling out of a miniature circus car, or maybe more like wiener dogs, spinning around confused and lost outside that car. We finally got our wits about us enough to push the car for what seemed a lifetime. I focused on my feet as I pushed, one foot in front of the other. I couldn't help but wonder if I was in a robot body or a meat body. Was this all preordained? Am I simply observing my legs being electronically motivated? We arrived at a parking lot near a strip mall and got back in the car to warm up and figure out what to do next. No one had any cell phones and we struggled immensely to remember anyone's phone number. After lots of back and forth, someone finally remembered they had a number written down on a piece of paper in their pockets. Adventure on. We piled out of the car again, this time with a mission. Find a payphone. We wandered up to a grocery store still somehow open at that hour and marched through the electronic door, which opened for us as if to inform us we were on the right path. Follow the acid-lit road, I sang aloud. There was a person dressed as Santa Claus, handing out candy canes. We asked for some and asked for more while Johnny or someone searched around for a phone. We amassed so many candy canes that we needed a shopping bag to hold them all. Sugar was sugar and sugar was food. Thanks, Santa. If the trash can outside someone found an empty gallon water jug, they thought it would make a good container for gasoline, apparently. They obviously didn't know what I did about mixing plastic and gasoline. There was no payphone in that grocery store, it turned out, but at least we had the candy canes. We started back to the car to figure out what to do next. We knew that roaming around in public late at night on copious amounts of acid wasn't a good idea. We arrived at the car and pulled the door handle. It was locked. We rummaged around for the keys for a minute before someone noticed the keys were sitting on the driver's seat, inside the locked car. We tried all the doors, nothing. So there we were, the five of us. It was around midnight in the freezing cold. We were standing outside of our car, which was spray painted with various tags and remarks. We were locked out of the car and had run out of gas. And all we had with us was an empty water jug and a grocery bag filled with candy canes. We missed the irony and humor of our situation, since these types of situations were all too common for us. Candyland hillbillies knew this wonderland of madness all too well. We wandered around looking for any other places at night that might have a phone. Someone spotted a Denny's diner. As we crossed the street to the restaurant, a police car did its slow roll right in front of us. We had to wait for it to pass in order to cross. Confrontation with police while on acid is not as fun as it sounds. It's downright terrifying for the uninitiated, but terror was something that could wait. We knew the drill by then. Blankly stare at something and just walk as non-robotically as possible. Correct for the natural urge to walk robotically. Swagger a bit, sway a little. We did get past that police officer, and eventually we did call someone to help us. Just another crazy experience. The basement. We started doing more and more meth. I ramped up every form of escape I had access to. We met a meth cook somewhere by chance. He prepared a fresh batch of meth in an abandoned house. Johnny and I hung out with him there, smoking and sniffing meth for several days straight, breaking only for fast food once a day. During the daytime, we took a used filter from the meth-making process and soaked it in boiling water. Meth tea, we called it. We even bombed meth, what we called wrapping a gram in a napkin and swallowing it whole. We often stayed up for 2 or more days in a row, but after a while that wasn't enough. I decided to push it. After staying up for somewhere around 5 days, my mind gave in completely. Shadow creepers, hallucinations, and paranoia were nothing new. I experienced them regularly, but usually ended the run after they came. The energy pouring out of my mind emboldened me to push through these barriers on this occasion. I'm going to beat them, or they're going to beat me. I blacked out from the meth, a symptom that comes in the later stages of delusion. After the shadow creepers turn to shadow demons. After the tunnel vision turns to black pulsing waves. I was neither here nor there. I have no idea what I must have looked like, or how I acted, or how long I was gone. But I was gone. I came back to consciousness in the same basement where we had once gotten our acid, an unknown amount of time later. I had no idea how I got there or what was happening, but Johnny was there with a concerned look on his face. He was talking to the acid dealers about me. Nah, he's cool, man. He'll be fine. He's talking about me. Johnny left the basement without saying anything to me. One of the dealers sat across from me. Hey, man, what's going on? He asked. I knew they were planning to deceive me. I knew they were trying to control my speech patterns by suggestive tones and keywords. Not much, just listening to what you're saying, I answered. You feeling all right? I knew it. All right means all right. All right means completely correct. He's asking me if I feel completely correct, which no one can feel. He's trying to trap me in a lie. Who is he with, the Sea Org? Is this a sec check? My God, they did believe me after all. They want to stop me. They want to stop Scythe Tleppo. They knew I was telling the truth. Time for battle again. I see what you did there, but you're outplayed. I'm not telling you anything, I professed. He looked at his friend briefly, then back at me. I know his dirty tricks. He is just like the others. Does he really think I don't know an auditor when I see one? Jesus. Scientology can find me anywhere. All right. Well, man, your friend says you need to chill here while he goes out and he'll be back, okay? Nobody's going to bother you. This guy is dirty. He's just digging and digging. Chill is a word old people use, or nerds who didn't know it's an old word. Scientologists try to use cool words to trick wogs into thinking they're normal. He's trying to build ARC with me. Of course, no one is going to bother me. They need my rudiments in to keep me in this guerrilla session. I need to think. I stayed down there hearing these deceivers try desperately to connect to me. Connection wasn't key because I needed auditing badly. I, the Thetan, was at risk here. What is this? Some kind of offline processing for special cases? Who hired them? My mom? How did she even track me down? There truly is no place to hide from them. I blacked out for the rest of our conversation, or possibly I passed out. I can't be sure. My consciousness next returned when I was mid-sentence asking for another bump of meth. Johnny, who had somehow returned by then, replied it wasn't a good idea. I was annoyed but felt like he was probably right. I didn't really know who these people were anymore or how long I had been down there, but I had slept at some point, and I just wanted to leave. This was the first time I ever truly lost myself to drugs. Looking back, I'm grateful for those near strangers for helping me come down gracefully. I have no idea how things would have turned out if I were roaming around the world with that head. I cooled it with the meth for a while. I didn't want it much. It took over a week off meth to realize just how mentally disturbed I had become. I began feeling appreciative toward Johnny. Thank God he was there to help me out. I owe him for that one. We had other friends who did meth, but I didn't touch it anymore. I didn't want to go back to that level. I fought the shadow demons and the creepers in the darkness inside that drug. I fought hard and I lost big. I had a difficult time getting back into LSD because, as any experienced user knows, the LSD trip is a personal one. LSD doesn't fix bad days, it intensifies them. That's normally the case anyway. I had a special relationship with acid. I felt I could communicate with it and guide it away from the dark moods, back into a good trip. Johnny and I prided ourselves on developing this talent. But something changed after my meth meltdown. Every trip involved a bad trip. Even if I steered the trip to a lighter mood, it would still be particularly bad. Bad trips are worse than they sound, even for people who can tolerate them like me. We needed to do something different. Anything. I was going crazy.